Hello Year 5 and welcome to your English lesson for today. So we're going to do a quick warm-up activity before we get on with our work for today. So this is called the I know, I think, I wonder activity. So I've got a picture for you because it's a little boy dressed as a clown in his little brum car and his little balloons. And I want you to think about this image and think, what do you know? What do you think you might know about that picture? And what might you wonder? Okay, so you need to create this table on in your books or on your piece of paper. Okay, or you can do it one sentence under the other. And I want you to write a sentence that starts with what I know. I want you to think I have a starter sentence with what I think, and you need to include in a sentence I wonder. So I know, I think, I wonder. Okay, so 3 different things that you need to tell me about your sentences. Okay, now you need to make sure that your think and wonder sentences contain a subordinating conjunction. Okay, and you're going to recap your subordinating conjunctions because you're going to need them for your lesson today. So this is a warm up to see if you can remember without me giving you the answers first. Okay, so pause the video, give yourselves 5 minutes. I want you to create 3 sentences of I know, I think, and I wonder about that picture. Off you go. Right, see if your examples were better than mine. So this one here, but I know that the boy is riding in a toy car. I think that the boy might be going to a party because, my conjunction, of the face paint and the bunch of balloons. And I wonder what the boy may have seen to cause him surprise as he looks startled. Okay, so I've got as in there as my conjunction as well. So, well done if you managed to write those 3 sentences. And if you missed out the subordinated conjunction or something that you've missed out, you need to go back and rewrite them. Okay, make sure you've got them included. So our lesson for today, we're going to look at using complex sentences and punctuation within our flashback. Okay, so we're going to firstly recap what a complex sentence is. Okay, because I know we talk about complex sentences and multi-clausal sentences, but we need to think, what is a simple sentence and what is a complex sentence? Because you're in year 5 now, they've got to be complex sentences. So we're going to be able to identify what a complex sentence is. And to do that, we're going to recap our subordinating conjunctions. Okay, so if you struggled with that on the opening activity, okay, you know it's your I saw a Warmup. Okay. We're then going to look at identifying subordinate conjunction within a sentence. So we're going to do some quick fire examples of sentences where you've got to try and identify where the subordinating conjunction is. We're then going to recap relative pronouns. Okay, we've looked at relative pronouns a few times during our lessons as we've gone through, especially we've looked at the repetition of not using the same words. Okay, so we're going to recap what a relative pronoun is. Then we're going to have a go identifying that relative pronoun within a relative clause, because we know subordinating clauses, but we also know relative clauses, but we always assume they've got to be an embedded clause with your who, what, you, when, where, which, and that. Okay, so we're going to recap that down. I'm going to model some examples to you. Then at the end of the lesson, you guys are going to use those skills from the lesson today to write your last part of your paragraph for our flashback. Okay, so let's start off at the beginning then. So let's have a quick recap. Let's have a quick recap. There you go. That was a sentence and a half. So what is a main clause? Okay, now a main clause, which could also be a simple sentence, is a group of words that's just one complete thought. Okay, so every main clause has a subject and a verb. Okay, and they're called independent clauses because they stand alone on their own and they make sense. Okay, so for example, can you spot the subject and the verb in these 2 sentences? We've got the horse galloped, Mr. Richardson ate some cheese. Okay, so the first one here, okay, horse and Mr. Richardson are the subject because that's what the sentence or who the sentence is about. First one's about the horse, the second one's about Mr. Richardson. Okay, then we're looking for the subject. What is it that we're actually talking about in the sentence? So here the horse galloped, okay, so this is the verb that they're doing, and here the Mr. Richardson ate. Okay, so we've got a subject, which is our who or the what, and our verb, which is what it is that they are doing. Okay, both very simple sentences, both main clauses because they make sense on their own. So if that's what a simple sentence is, what is a complex sentence? So it's made up of a main clause and one or more dependent clauses. So usually are subordinating clauses. Now we've got into the habit of doing multi-clausal sentences, which applies to that one or more part of our clausal sentences. Now there's 2 ways of creating a dependent clause. Okay, you can either use a subordinated conjunction, okay, to create a subordinate clause. So the horse galloped after it jumped the fence. Or you can use it to add additional information using a relative clause. And here, this is where it's been embedded into the sentence. Okay, we've got our hooks, our bed sheets, when we take that information out and get rid of it. So Mr. Richardson, who was feeling ravenous, ate some cheese. I wonder if you know what ravenous means. What does ravenous mean? Really hungry. And we describe it as ravenous because we have ravens, and ravens, a bit like vultures, will peck at food when they're really, really hungry. So they'll like rip bones and muscles apart if, you know, from dead carcasses that they find. So when we say that someone is feeling ravenous, that is telling us that they are extremely hungry. Okay. So Let's have a look at creating some complex sentences using subordinate clauses. Okay, and we're going to do it so they begin with a subordinate conjunction. So we have our I saw a Warmup. So we have if, since, as, when, although, while, after, before, until, and because. Okay, so those are our subordinating conjunctions. Okay, and those are words that we're going to focus on using in today's lesson. So let's just move that. So how do we use subordinating conjunctions? So the subordinate conjunction is used at the beginning of the subordinate clause. So the bit of the sentence that doesn't make sense on its own has to start with that subordinating conjunction, okay? Now we know that subordinate clauses don't make sense on their own, and that's because they're dependent. When you're dependent on someone or on something, that means you're relying on them. So when I was younger, I was dependent on my mum and dad. I couldn't look after myself all the time. I needed my mum and dad to help me. Now as an adult, I'm independent, okay? I rely on myself. I get myself where I need to be. I sort my food. I wash my bed sheets. I make my bed. Okay, so there's a difference between being dependent and independent, okay? But when it's used with a main clause, when you have your main clause and your subordinate clause, so your simple sentence and your independent sentence and your dependent sentence, it joins together to create a complex sentence. So it's a multi-clausal sentence because you've got your main clause and your subordinate clause, okay? So they've always got to have a subject and a verb, okay? So before they left, okay, before being our subordinating conjunction, subject being they, verb left, before they left, okay? That is the start of a subordinate clause. Before the holidays, okay? Now here, before is being used as a preposition. It's telling us when something's happening. So this is a time preposition. So we've got before the holidays. Now that's not a subordinate clause, okay? Because that's telling us a time. Here is before they left, okay? It's being used as part of the conjunction. So let's see if you can spot the subordinate clause and subordinating conjunction. So juvenile penguins are able to swim, although their feathers aren't yet waterproof, okay? Pause the video and have a think. Where is my subordinate clause and what's the conjunction? Okay, so that is my subordinating clause. Okay, and we know that because it starts with although that seems to have moved. It should be although, all the way over here. My PowerPoint has moved it. So although over here is our subordinate clause. Conjunction at the beginning of our clause. Let's have a go at this one. Let's see if it highlights it in the right place this time. The Boy Scouts sang around the campfire until it was bedtime. Okay, pause the video. Where is my subordinate clause? Where is my subordinate conjunction? Okay, so my subordinate clause there is until it was bedtime. Okay, hey, it worked this time around. And my subordinating conjunction, okay, is until. Okay, so that's the additional part that I've added to my sentence. Hakim could win the talent contest if he improved his juggling skills. Okay, so pause the video. Where's my subordinating clause there? And what is my conjunction? Okay, so if he improved his juggling skills, that's my subordinate clause, and it starts with if, which isn't anywhere near where that circle has now moved itself to. That circle should be here. Okay, trust technology to get this all wrong for me. So the subordinating conjunction there is the word if, not imp. Just in case you're confused. So those subordinate clause, those complex sentences that we've looked at so far, the subordinate clauses always come at the end of the sentence. Now you guys know well enough to know that doesn't always go at the end of a sentence. Where else could I put a subordinate clause? Go at the beginning of a sentence. Could even have it in the middle. Could be an embedded clause. It's still a subordinate clause. It doesn't make sense on its own. Miss Humphrey, who loved chocolate, ate two cherry chocolate orange for breakfast. Miss Humphrey ate 2 cherry chocolate oranges for breakfast. That middle part of who likes chocolate, that doesn't make sense on its own. So although it's a relative clause, it's still an embedded clause, it's still subordinate clause. It still doesn't make sense on its own. It's a dependent clause. So let's have a look at some examples. Still didn't work. Juvenile penguins are able to swim, although their feathers aren't yet waterproof. Let's switch it round. Although now it works. Although their feathers aren't yet waterproof, juvenile penguins are able to swim. Now you'll see here that this time around we've had to use our comma. Okay, because that's part of the subordinate clause, and this is the main clause that we've added on. Okay, so what we need to think about here is that the first word, okay, in the complex sentence this time around is the subordinating conjunction. Now, when it comes first, like we've said, we have to have that comma there to mark the end of where that subordinate clause is. Okay, now let's see if you can swap these sentences around so the subordinate clause becomes before the main clause. Now, don't forget your commas. Okay. So, the Boy Scouts sang around the campfire until it was bedtime, and Hakim could win the talent contest if he improved his juggling skills. Now, ignore the circles. I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint, but it's moved them all. So, let's see if you can say them out loud. You can say them out loud. You have to write them down. Say them out loud to yourself. How would you swap those round? So, the first one there is going to be until it was time for bed. The Boy Scouts sang around the campfire. And obviously, I've got my comma here at the end of my subordinate clause. Here, if he improved his juggling skills, Hakim could win the talent contest. Again, we've started with both of our subordinate conjunctions, and I've got my comma in there as well. Okay? So let's look at creating some of those complex sentences using relative clauses. Okay, now they are a different type of dependent clause, like I said, okay, and they also, like a subordinate clause, give additional information, but we're just going to embed them into the middle of our sentences. Now we know they start with relative pronouns, okay, so we've got our who, which, whose, whom, that, and where. So those are a little chunk of a sentence that starts with those relative pronouns, hence why it's called a relative clause, because it starts with a relative pronoun, okay. So, can you spot the relative clause in this complex sentence? Okay, and think about what is the relative clause describing. So, mysterious Malcolm, who is a children's entertainer, wows his audience with his magic tricks. Just pause the video and have a think. Where is my relative clause? And what is it describing? Okay, well, my relative clause there is who is the children's entertainer. And the who, okay, we're looking at here, which clearly hasn't circled it again, okay, is talking about mysterious Malcolm, okay? So that who is linking to mysterious Malcolm. Now, when the relative clause is embedded, you can see here that we've got both of our commas and punctuations. My whole PowerPoint has moved. I apologise. So we've got both of the commas. Remember, our commas are like our bed, our blanket. So you've got the bed, you, and your blankie, your bed and your blankie. Those are the two commas that we take out from our bed and we get rid of them. And that, if I take that additional information out, my sentence is still going to make sense on its own. What about this one here? The astronaut bounded towards the space buggy, which had been parked in a crater. Okay, craters. Oh, that's interesting. You'll know that from your science lesson that you did yesterday. So can you spot where the relative clause is and what it's talking about? Good. So my relative clause there is which had been parked in a crater. Okay, and the which, okay, was actually talking about the buggy. Okay. So it's moved over here. So the which here, okay, the astronaut bounded towards the buggy which had been parked in the crater. The astronaut's not going to be parked in a crater. He's not a vehicle. But the space buggy has been parked. The which there is describing this space buggy. And obviously we've added that additional information in there. Okay, so let's see if you can spot the complex sentences in this text. So just pause the video and have a read and see if you can identify where there may be 2 or 3 different complex sentences. Okay, well, let me show them to you on here. So we've got Philip's heart sank as he knew he was lost. The group of climbers who Philip had started out with, so they've got an embedded relative clause, while there was still a little light, comma, so we've now started with our subordinate clause. The temperature, which was now close to 0, so another embedded relative clause, and if he couldn't find a way to keep warm, comma, so there we started with our subordinate clause. So you can see the different variations of how we do it. So here we've got it at the end of the sentence, here we've got 2 embedded clauses, and then here we've got it at the beginning of the sentence, so we can move it in 3 different places, okay? So you guys now are going to have a go at practicing this one on your own, okay?